creating a positive learning environment, engagement and motivation. Share those strategies to keep them engaged, right? And motivate them through training processes. It has to be part of your core. It can't just be like we said earlier, oh, I'm just going to be here for like 3 or 4 weeks and then I'm done with training for the rest of the year.
Welcome to the Strategy with Jason podcast. Tune in for everything you need to know to stay in the know regarding the automotive industry. Here's your host, Jason Harris.
Hey, what's going on, Podcast Nation? It is Jason Harris here, and thank you for joining me on another episode of the Golden Wrench Podcast, where I get to talk to anybody and everybody I want to talk to when it comes to the fixed ops side of the business. And I got a guest for you guys today, a very special guest, in fact. But hey, we can't make really cool content like this without our sponsors. And boy, do we have an amazing sponsor. So here's a quick message from them.
For years, I've been saying that you have to process your way to profitability, and no one knows that better than the folks at Repair 360. You all know how important it is to have a fast, streamlined used car reconditioning process. Remember, time kills profit. Getting a used car frontline ready in less time while providing transparent communication between departments is what Repair 360 is all about. With Repair 360's automated used car recon manager, you will drive recon times down while giving sales the visibility they need to stop complaining. Oh, no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding about that part. Anyways, you have to check out their website at repair360.com and see how they can revolutionize your reconditioning process.
Okay, guys, I told you I had a great guest with me. I do. I have the one, the only, the oh so famous. All right, Corey Smith with Easy Care. What's going on, Corey?
Hey, Jason. Thanks for having me on. The one and the only, huh? Wow, I like that. Being one
There's
of
one
one.
of the Corey Smiths at Easy Care, right? So
I'm it.
You're it. You're the one, the only. Hey, look, man, I am so glad we get a chance to jam today. Guys, if you don't know, me and Corey have known each other for a while. So if there's kind of like some inside giggling and stuff like that, just ignore it. But we got some really cool topics that we're going to dive into. And Corey, I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to come jam with me. But hey, Corey, but before we get into really the weeds of it today, I love kicking off these podcasts with a little origin story. Because I'm still fascinated, and I know you got a cool origin story. So let's start there. Corey, how did you get started in this crazy little world we call the automotive industry?
Oh man. Geez, I was working. I was probably in my mid-20s. I was working at a mid to high-end audio store called Tweeter, and
That's a good name, actually. I like that.
yeah, and I met this dealer and sold him a bunch of high-end equipment. And he said, "You should come work for my service department." And I was like, "I don't know, He's like, "You get weekends off." Back then, we had weekends off, right? And I was like, "Oh, that could be fun." I had to work weekends in retail, so I took it, and that's how I got in the business. I didn't last very long because there was no training. It was, there's your phone, there's your computer, there's your route sheet, those are your texts. Good luck, right? So I went back to Tweeter because I was comfortable there, and they invested in your training, right? They sent you to Boston to do all the gear training and all that stuff. And another service director came in from a different dealership and said the same thing to me. I'm like, nah, I played that game. It didn't work out. He's like, why didn't it work out? I was like, I didn't get any training. I lasted maybe 8 months. He's like, I will personally train you. And that guy's name was Gary Pouillat. And I took the job. He lived up to what he promised me, and he taught me everything about the business. I don't know where I'd be without Gary.
Awesome. Is Gary still around? Is he still around?
Gary's still around. He's still a service manager in the Maine market. That's where I'm originally from. And, I owe a lot of my success to him. He was a mentor to me. He believed in me. And even when I messed up, he was like, hey, let's just learn from it. Right. It was never, well, if you don't get good CSI, you're out the door. Right. It was, hey, let's try to get you better CSI. Let's try to help. You're strong in this. Let's try to get you help here. Right. And I can't thank him enough for that. So I got in the business in 98, and I did retail until 2016. And then I started working. I got out of retail, started my own fluid company. Did that for a couple of years. Then I went to work for JD Power, and then I made a PowerPoint, talked to Tony Wanderon, and said, "Hey, I think you should hire me, and here's why." And he did it, and then he said, "Well, since you have this radio background, I want you to do a podcast too for the company." I'm like, "Okay." I had no idea what I was doing.
It's okay.
So
Do that way.
fast forward, here we are.
Dude, I love it. I love it. And you know what? Shout out to Gary. All right. I think maybe my next podcast might have to be with Gary. I think we can convince him to come on and do a podcast because
Oh, he would love it. He'd probably talk so fast you wouldn't even know what he's saying.
well, I love it because I mean the funny thing is it's kind of a perfect segue kind of into our discussion today, right? Because we wanted to talk about investing in people. And it's funny that you went to one dealership and look that the story you have is funny because it's actually really common. I've actually heard slightly different variations. I worked at a restaurant, came back, went over there, but until they found somebody that was willing to invest into them, did they actually stay in one place for a long period of time, regardless if it's automotive or any other vertical, right? So,
Mm.
so I do kind of want to go. I want to talk a little bit more about Gary. So, he made a promise to you. All right.
Mm.
And he was willing to invest. What did the first 2 weeks look like for you, Corey? I'm just curious.
Oh man, if I can go back to those first 2 weeks, it was a lot of shadowing the other advisors. There was two advisors that had been there for well over a decade. Um, the advisor that I was replacing um, had been there for over 20 years, and Gary had found out that they were doing unethical things, selling 30,000 mile services multiple to the same customer multiple times. Um, so he really taught me the DMS. I think that was the first 2 weeks, and job shadowing people,
Mhm.
understanding the shop and how it flows. It was a Chrysler store, so there was a blue team and a red team, and I was going to be hitting up the blue team, right? And I think after that, he had me sit down in a room and do all the Chrysler training. Had me do that, and that took me probably another 2 or 3 weeks. And then he was out there in the drive with me, basically standing behind me
Right.
as I'm meeting and greeting customers. And I think for the good 90 days, he didn't leave my side. We had lunch together. We talked.
Love it.
He invested a lot of time into me. Now that I look at it as a above view, I'm like, he didn't have to do any of that, but he did.
Well, okay. Did he have to? Because I think you do, right? And actually, it's funny. I love the fact that you brought up shadowing because I actually think it's kind of a lost art form of shadowing,
Mhm.
right? I mean, if you kind of think about this, sports teams do this, and they do this without even thinking that they're doing it, right? Like when they bring a rookie in, what does that rookie do? Well, they get attached to a senior person who's playing that same position,
Yep.
right? Because I mean, talk about the path of quickly learning, from others, is that being able to shadow 'em. I mean, I always kind of think back to that old song, my shadow and me, right? Because that's really ideally what you want to do. You want to take your best performing individual, right, and try to duplicate that person in as much as you can. And shadowing is, again, I just think it's a lost art. I mean, I remember when I first started in the business, I was kind of supposed to shadow somebody, but
Mhm.
again, there was no process. So what I ended up being was like somebody's just like gopher for 3 weeks, like go get my coffee, answer the phones for me, take a message, call this person back. Like it was a bad example. So I mean, like, here's, I think, the thing, what I'm trying to say here is that investing in people has to be intentional, or it can just happen and it doesn't, it just goes either way. But I want to get into kind of what, when you hear investing in people, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
I think when you talk about investing into people, it's can it what is the goal of investing in that people first, right? And if it's I want them to be better, like if you take a page from the Ted Lasso series, I don't know if you've watched it, but his goal was to
Oh, I
make
love
them
it.
better people, not to be better athletes, not to be better footballers, right? It was to be better people on and off the pitch, I think is what he said, right? So and I think
Yes.
you used the correct term, investing. It's not I'm spending money I'm investing into
Mm.
them, right? I'm not spending time with my family. I'm investing time with my family, right? It's an investment. It's not a loss. When we say I'm spending, that means it's a loss. It's not a loss. It's going to be a gain. They're going to be better, right? At some facet of what you're teaching them. As long as there is a level of accountability there too, right? So when you say that invest in training, it is making them better people.
And making them better people. I mean, training is one thing, and then there's four topics actually I kind of want to go down with you today, because I love training, I truly do. But I have found recently that it's kind of, I'm not going to say for a lot, but I would say for a pretty large chunk of the operations that I have had the opportunity to go visit and do some consulting on, is that it's kind of come this proverbial checkbox. Like, okay, I brought a trainer in for a couple weeks, box checked, and with kind of no overarching strategy, moving forward, you know, f- and I'd love to kind of get your thoughts on just like on that and kind of in general, that statement. Do you see the same thing that I'm seeing? I'm just curious.
Yes, 100%. I see that, and I try to call it out when I see it. And I'm like, listen, we can come in and just do some training, and we can leave. But the minute we leave, they're going to go back to doing whatever they were doing before because it's comfortable. If you truly want to grow, you've got to learn to be okay with being uncomfortable, right?
Yes,
And if you really want to understand the service advisor's role and the managers, their key responsibility is improving their department. Service advisors and managers are driving customer satisfaction and sales and retention. Those all have to go together. The skill set that's required for doing that is discussing uh, crucial things that come up on a car, having that skill set to talk about things that are bad, right? And they're the judge, jury, and executioner at some point, right? And
mhm,
you've got to be okay with telling a customer, hey, your vehicle is broken and here's what it's going to take to fix. Not the advisor's mindset is, well, I don't want the customer to be mad at me because then I'll get bad CSI.
of course.
They're not here for another friend, right? So
But
you got to be nice to them and you got to be friendly, but you don't need to think that. You got to have those type of communication skills. You've got to have technical knowledge, problem solving, and you got to put the customers first.
Well, you're 100% right, and our training has to be supported by the statement you just made, right? Like, again, training for the sake of training again doesn't work, but if I have the objective of putting the customer first, or you have to be intentional with it. So then the training's got purpose to it, right?
Mhm.
But then to your point, once we're done training, we have to be able to coach. And here's one thing: like, I'm the first one to admit to you that when I had my dealership, I was horribly bad at this part of the process, right? Like, I could sit there and train people on how to do their job. Not a problem. Do that all day long. You're not sure how to get that fixed? I'll show you how to do it. You're not sure how to pull that report? I'll show you how to pull it. Like, I could just, I mean, unless I had to put wrenches in my hand, otherwise than that, I could show you how to do it, right?
I'm good at breaking things. Fixing was not my bag.
Oh, 100%. Okay. So when it came to coaching, I was bad at it. I was, but I knew I was. So therefore, I actually hired for that. Right. But training without coaching, I think it just kind of all falls apart because to me, in my head, the coaching element now comes in and is actually now measuring things. Because when I think of what a good coach does, right? They're tracking at bats. They're tracking, what are my closing ratios? They're tracking what my, what is my lines per RO. They're tracking the data, all right, to then go back and continue training me on how I can become better. But I see this is where we kind of stop. It seems like for a lot of operations out there, we get to the point of training 3 weeks, whatever, 2 weeks, whatever, and then and we forget that we have to continue to coach these people. And I know you got some thoughts on this as well, and I'd love to kind of get your perspective.
So if we look at what you just said with coaching, which I'm 100% on board, it's also the importance of tailoring the training program, looking at the skill level of your team, right?
Mm.
So if we customize and have training breakout sessions with a veteran that's been doing it a long time, that he or she are going to need a certain training that the new person that's only been doing it for 90 days doesn't need, right? Because it's too
I
advanced.
see what you're saying. It's like balancing out the level of training and coaching necessary based on the individual.
Right. So you look at you look at that, and so you're splitting those people up. What we do when we go in and train at a dealership, we look at their skill levels. We have them fill out some paperwork, right? And then we get a good idea of what they know and what they lack, and look at their numbers and all that stuff. And then we put them in a room. When we leave, we give a detailed outline of everything that we talked about, what we did, so that the managers and the owner can act like they were in the room. They can walk up to those people that were in the class and say, "Hey, you learned how to present the multi-point to a customer. Pretend I'm a customer and you present the multi-point how you learned it," right? And the advisor's going, "Oh no, they know. I should have been paying attention." And then that's where the growth is. So when the manager or the owner comes and asks you that and you don't know and they know the answer, they then critique you and coach you and hold you accountable. And then they leave you and say, "Okay, next week I'm going to come ask you the same thing. Make sure you're ready." Right?
I love this idea. I love this. Train on the activity, but coach on the growth.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's kind of where you're going with it, right?
It's perfectly well said. Understanding their skill level, talking about what making it easy for the advisor to learn and have them pay attention. Because if you go in and teach the same stuff over and over again, the guy's been doing it for 30 years,
Sure.
is going to know it, right? So if you incorporate training into or coaching into the training, ongoing development, explaining how this is going to help you improve, support, and develop those opportunities, personalize that feedback, right? The advisor should be asking, "How did I do?" Right? And the person coaching should be saying, "Okay, we're going to talk about this. You're really great there." What I do when I'm in a class is I'll say to them, "If you had to rate yourself 1 through 4 on that performance, what would you give yourself?"
Yeah.
Right? And they rate themselves. And 9 times out of 10, they'll rate themselves really low because everyone's harder on themselves, right? So I don't grade them. They grade themselves. Then I tell them, "I understand. I think you're a little hard on yourself. I would have given you a this, right? And here's why, and here's some things you can work on." And that's real world scenarios, right? That's real role playing exercises,
Mhm.
keeping it brief, maybe recording it. I record it. If we're going to get awkward and role play, hey, let's record it. And advisors will be like, "Well, I don't want to record it." I'm like, "We're going to watch this a year from now and you're going to see your growth." That's where the positive comes in. So then they're like, "Okay." And there's a lot of case studies around doing stuff like that, real world examples, recording it, challenging the advisors, and even challenging the managers of what they face day to day, right?
Well, you know what? And the cool thing, Corey, of kind of having you on here is that, you know, you do this on a daily basis. This is what I think is really cool about what you guys do over there. You have seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I'm not just talking about the movie, but you've kind of seen it all. Give me an example of let's go with a good one, right? Like give me a good example of when this is executed, training, but then the combination of training and coaching together. What's a good example on how does that kind of play out inside the department?
Well, I'd say the biggest one that I've got to date is one of the best examples. And it's going to sound weird when I talk about it. It's a dealership in New Orleans.
Okay.
They're a Chevy store. This manager had 6 new advisors, and he wanted to go through our training. And we went through probably like 4 or 5 months of our training. They went from 1.4 per repair order as a team to 2.6.
Ooh, dog.
But it wasn't just the training is the training, right? I can lead the horse to water, so to speak, but I can't make it drink, right?
Well, it's
I
the team. Yep.
I gave them the tools, right? I'm the tool guy, but it was the manager that took it upon himself to hold them accountable, coach, be there every day where I couldn't. And his team was also embracing this new technique or this training, and
Mhm.
they were bought into it. If you go into it just saying, I'd rather be on the drive because I'm losing money here in this stupid training, right? This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. That's a negative mindset. You're already lost at that point, right? But if you go in with an open mind, like, I'm going to grab at least 10% of what he's talking about, something to make myself better, right? And that's where you get that growth. So that's the biggest. Normally, we're seeing our dealers do an average of 2 to 3 tenths better per repair order, which could mean millions of dollars of revenue
Of course.
to the dealership.
Well, and look, and I think that's a good point that we should bring up for everybody out there watching and listening right now. Look, investing in your people is not just a good idea. It is a financially a smart move. All
Mhm.
right. And I think sometimes for some people out there, things kind of live in good idea world. But when you actually start to put numbers together, look, when we can train them on processes that effectively create a better customer experience and generate more lines per RO, we are going to increase our revenue. If we can consistently coach our team to just grow a little bit better in each one of these processes. And that's the other thing too, is I find with coaching is you have the measurement portion of it, right? To grow, you have to be able to measure. What would you say? And I'm curious from your perspective, what are some of the key measurements, all right, that a dealership should be doing to effectively be able to coach their team successfully?
Well, you have some key metrics that are out there, whether it's dollars per repair order, lines per repair order,
But
effective
is that
labor rate.
still the old school, or is this like are we still looking? I'm just curious. Like
It's still
the
measurable, right? If you want to have a smart goal, it's got to be measurable. And realistically, I'm kind of into the whole telly thing of selling time, right? And
Mhm,
that's your quantifiable. If
mhm.
you've got 5 technicians and we want them to turn 10 hours a day, that's 50 hours you have to sell, right? So if you only sell 40, can you sell 60 tomorrow? No, you only have 50 in your inventory, right? If I have X amount of cars in my lot, let's say 20, and the one that the customer wants is not on the lot, can I sell it? No, I can't, right? You got to sell what you have, right? And you got to maximize what you have, and you have to be intentional with doing that. And I think that's a great measurement, but they're all important. But if you want to set a clear expectation, you need to talk about the importance and the with them. What's in it for the advisors to be part of
Yes.
this and perform these metrics, right? So you got to set a clear goal and a clear expectation for the service advisors, and if you're a director or an owner, for the manager too. Monitoring that the progress, discussing how to track performance through those key
Mhm.
metrics, and regular check-ins. It has to be regular because if you want to try to do it on Friday at 5 o'clock, it's never going to happen. You got to pick a time and stick to it, right? And
Well,
holding
and
people accountable.
you know what? It's funny. I love the fact you brought up the word accountability, because you actually did say it one other time before, and I actually made a note because I did want to kind of swoop around to that. But before I get into accountability, because again, not necessarily my strongest suit, and I'll explain why. But I did want to go back to the fact that around time, the comment you made around time, because when I was an advisor, this was something that actually came up, and I actually it actually kind of drove me nuts. I actually kind of argued with it a little bit, because back when I was an advisor, it was about the lines per RO,
Mhm.
right? But if I created deeper connections and relationships, I sold bigger jobs. I just frankly did, right? So just because I might have had less lines, 30% less lines, I still had 45% more times sold. So like I'm with you on that. I think and I just wanted to point that out real quick because I think if anybody out there watching, listening, who's still kind of focusing on lines per RO, it's not necessarily that you maybe stop, but I think to Corey's point here is that the real number at the end of the day is the hours being sold. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, 100%. If you're just selling a widget just to sell a widget, and all of a sudden your technicians are standing around doing nothing, they're not going to be there very long. They're going to
Yeah,
go home
because we've
early.
seen
They're
that
going to look for
happen, right?
another jobs, right? Yeah, yeah.
We've definitely seen that happen. Okay, okay. I want to go into accountability. So look, I was not overly great, all right, at holding people accountable, but I'll tell you why. All right, because I thought holding people accountable was a lot of yelling and screaming. All right. And I did a fair amount of yelling and screaming. I guess I did it so much. One year I had an employee, and this was actually an aha moment for me. I actually employee for Christmas crochet me this pillow that said, "Shut the up and get back to work." And I guess because I said that so many times that it became a thing. And I had a moment. I had a moment. Okay, I realized something, right? For me to hold people accountable, I need to up my game in the emotional intelligence space. All right.
Mhm.
My EQ. Okay. Now I got to be honest with you. When I first heard about it, I was like, oh, okay, well, are we gonna hold hands and sing "Kumbaya"? Like, this was, this is just. Well, I mean, that was the background. Like, I think my managers had emotional intelligence. Hell no. I remember shit getting thrown at me for like not doing things correctly. Like, you know what I mean? I got chased out of my owner's office one time by my owner. Anyways, I digress. But I've I want to get into this because you know I believe, there has to be a level of emotional intelligence to hold people professionally accountable, but I want to get your thoughts on it.
So holding people accountable, it doesn't have to be a yelling session. It just has to be, hey, we talked about this. Um, w- what are you missing here? Or what can I help you with? Right? You're doing really good here. And again, the employee has changed over the years, right?
Mhm.
They're not like you and I. They're different, and we have to change our methodology. We're teaching and talking about being servant leaders. I'm here to help you. Where if I were to categorize any boss that I had was they're I'm here for them. And it's the other way around now. Now if you're in leadership, you're serving your people. And if you're not serving your people, you're not going to be in leadership very long. So explain to them, hey, this is to help you, right? I want you to get your goals. You said your goals were to buy a summer home, right? The more money you make, the more you're able to buy that summer home. Explain
Mhm.
the needs of the accountability in the meeting, those performance goals, right? And how coaching can help support that. Creating a positive learning environment, engagement and motivation. Share those strategies to keep them engaged, right? And motivate them through training processes. It has to be part of your core. It can't just be like we said earlier, oh, I'm just going to be here for like 3 or 4 weeks and then I'm done with training for the rest of the year.
Box checked. Yep.
Right. You're just going through the motions at that point. I've never stopped learning. I'm always learning something, and I'm always open to learning something, because the more I learn, the more stuff I can use, and then the easier it is for me, right? If you just say, "Oh, I've done it for so long, I know I don't need to be here," then you've got a negative mindset, and then you're always gonna get to what you always got, right? And the true definition of insanity is what?
Same thing, expecting the same different results.
Yeah, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, right? So the training also has to be interactive. It can't just be Ferris Bueller's Day Off where the guy's going and just talking and you're just falling asleep, right? It has to be interactive. It has to be fun. It has to be intentional what you're talking about and impactful. So you got to emphasize, if you're looking for a trainer at a dealership, you got to emphasize that we want interaction. We want to give that value, that hands-on training that
Yes.
encourages our people to actively listen, because they'll listen by accident. They'll come in with a negative mindset, and then all of a sudden I'm passing out prizes of unspeakable value, and they're like, "Oh, this is cool," and they learn something, right?
Well, and that's really kind of getting into kind of that emotional intelligence, right? Like if I want some people to connect with someone, then I need to kind of connect with them at their level. It's no different than what we do in sales. But I do want to kind of, you mentioned the thing about the vacation home. Was the vacation home? Yeah, right.
Yeah,
And so like here's one thing I've really found in our industry. If you're out there watching, listening to this, I think you could probably relate to this if you've been in the business for a long time. All right. Management is typically really good at explaining um, why they need something done. Like, I need you to do this so we can get to this objective. Like this is
yep,
my why. My why is we have to do 200K this year, 200K this month in this department. All right, like that's my. But if we don't translate our dealership's operational why to the individual's why and break that down, then there's necessarily, because like we're the first ones to tell you, hey, I need you to do this, and I need you to do this, and I need you to do this. Well, why? Because we need to get to 200K this month. Like that's a good enough answer. All right. But to your point, accountability, holding someone accountable is a lot easier when you know what their why is, right?
yeah.
So it like I mean, I've had all kinds of different ages and different backgrounds and people in different stages of their life work for me over the years. I remember I had one young guy who just flat out told me he wanted a jet ski. That was it. Like this, I can't imagine. Like this was his full goal in life, was to be able to afford to. He just wanted a jet ski. He just in his head that was going to make his life so much better to be able to spend weekends at the beach and on a jet ski. Well, how much is a jet ski? $7,500. All right, break this down, right? So that my why and his why were directly attached to each other. Now going backwards to hold them accountable on the things that we trained and the growth parts that we coached on was wildly different, right? I
Mhm.
mean, I'm sure you've seen this play out at dealerships as well. When accountability is connected to someone's why, have you seen some great things happen?
Oh, tremendous things can happen when you understand someone's why, right? And if we go back to your first thing, you talked about investment, right? You've got to do
Mm-hmm.
that with your staff. If you're a manager or an owner, you're investing into your people by talking to them, getting to know them. The teaching that to the advisor, building value, right? So when I have them come into class, I'll ask them, I'll go before we even start, hey, how long you been in the business? What's your name? What's one cool thing about you, right? And they all go around the room. And later in the class, I'm like, why did I ask you that? And they're like, because you're investing into us, and then you're gonna make a withdrawal. So if we think of our employees like ATMs, right? If you
Mm-hmm.
you go to your if you don't make any investments into your employee, can you take any money out of them?
Good
No,
point. No, you can't.
right?
There's
So
nothing.
I'm making mental deposits into you, Jason, right? Reinforcing you're a great person. I'm here to support you. What's your why? How was your weekend? Right? I remember you said you were going to go on vacation. How was that? Right? That's all investments. That's all value, 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 value. Now I'm going to make a withdrawal. Jason, I really need you to go to this training, and here's why. And I think it's going to match with what you're looking for that can help you with some of the things that you're struggling with. Oh,
Mm.
yeah, I'm in, right? It's the same thing with a customer. If you don't make mental deposits into that customer, doing the walk around, doing this, or getting to know them, or giving them the great customer service, and you just treat them like a transaction, and then you go into Mrs. Jones, say, "Hey, Mrs. Jones, you need an air filter." She's going to say, "I need to talk to my spouse. I don't have time. I don't have the money." Right? All those objections. But if you would have taken the time to walk around her vehicle, pop the hood, tell her about how great the dealership is, right? Show her around the dealership because she's only been there 2 times in the last couple of years, right? Invest into her. Make mental deposits, and then you can make a withdrawal. If you don't, you won't get a
So
sale. You'll get all the negatives.
no, no, no. You're absolutely right. And it sounds like once you kind of like are able to execute all these things, and you mentioned the word earlier, you really now become a leader,
Mhm.
right? I don't think leaders happen by accident. I think leaders happen because they're intentional. And as a leader in your business and in your service shop, all right, you're leading your team through training. You're leading them and coaching them through the growth, right? And a leader has that emotional intelligence to professionally hold someone accountable because they're aware of what makes them tick. They're aware of their why, right? And then that's, I think when you really kind of combine all three of these things, you get some amazing leaders. Now, here's my question for you, Corey, because I know you're on the road and you've met all different types of leaders out there. All right. And I'm a patterns guy, and I'm sure you are too. All right. What have you seen that's kind of consistent in some of the best performing leaders, all right, in the fixed op space out there?
I think the best ones that are out there have this, whether it's in their DNA or just part of their core, is they don't consider themselves a boss. They consider themselves as part of the team. If I'm going to have somebody go out and do it, I'm going to do it too, right? And they have that emotional intelligence to recognize when their team is struggling. And if you look at a boss, the boss is going to sit in his office with his feet up, right? A real leader is going to get out and help his team because they're struggling, right? And I run
So
into it
true.
all the time when I say, "Okay, we gotta train your staff." Well, I'm a person short. Okay, you don't want to jump in and write service. That's almost what I feel like saying. And the manager refuses to because I've done that, or I don't need to go back to there. So you're just going to have to come back again, or we'll have to reschedule, or you're just going to have to take the people that I have. And that is a negative mindset. And that's not going to get you very far, but I do see it. Uh, the So if you're really thinking of leader, you don't have to have the title to be a leader. You can be an advisor and still be a leader. You can be a porter and still be a leader. You can be a technician, still be a leader. It doesn't have to be with your title, right? And that's the one thing I didn't understand when I was as an advisor. I didn't think I had that sense of power, right? But when I started getting more training and stuff like that, I'm like, yeah, I don't need to be a manager to lead, to help people, and that's what I did.
No, you're absolutely right. And leadership can be found throughout. And I think as owners, if you're out there watching, listening right now, that is one of your responsibilities to keep your eye for leadership. And when you see that fire in someone, and the drive to be a leader, you need to continue to throw kindle on that and continue to grow that fire. And that's a trait that I have found in some of the best owners and operators out there. That is something that they do, again, either unknowingly or knowingly they do it. It is just a consistent trait that I have found in some of the best owners out there. They see leadership in all different types of roles, and they continue to flame that fire and let it continue to grow. Hey, look, Corey, I know we're towards the tail end of our time today, and this has been fun, man. This has been a lot of fun. I knew it was going to be fun. I knew the second, like, me and you get on here, we're going to talk about investing with people, training, coaching, EQ, leadership. This is always going to be a great time. But hey, Corey, before I let you go, for everybody out there watching and listening, who would maybe like to connect with you, if they haven't connected with you and maybe want to learn more about you and what you guys do, what's the best way to connect?
Well, I'm a huge I'm on LinkedIn, so I'm always there. You want to connect there, you can send me an email, csmith@apcoholdings.com. Love to talk about this kind of stuff. As you can tell, I'm super passionate about it. I love it, and I really appreciate you having me on.
Hey, man, this has been so much fun. I really appreciate you taking the time to jam with me today. Hey, for everyone out there, we appreciate you. The best thing you can ever do, all right, to help us and support us is share the show. All right. If you know somebody that would, get a little piece of value or, really just kind of enjoy listening to the conversation we had today, we would really appreciate if you shared the show. Thank you so much. We appreciate you all. Everyone, you guys have yourselves an amazing day. Thanks, Corey.
Thanks for tuning in to the Strategy with Jason podcast with your host, Jason Harris. Don't want to miss new content? Be sure to check out the full podcast library at strategywithjason.com to stay in the know. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Happy podcasting.